Freyrin had never felt this tired in her entire life. She was not even aware bones could hurt the way that hers were currently aching, and it was only by the kindness of her sister's visit that her feet weren't falling apart at the ankle. The new formulations of Yorpal footwear were doing much to ease the pain of the recruits currently suffering through human boot camp, and were catching on like wildfire back on their home planet of Dagmar Prime. A lot of the humans swore that a soldier began from the feet up, and Freyrin had no idea how the humans even managed to run in the casement-like boots they wore on the daily. Freyrin, of course, was one of the Yorpal, a semi-bestial race of aliens that were adorned with snout and paws. The humans called them furries, much to their annoyance, and seemed to delight in making fun of their vibrant fur colors. Freyrin's fur was a dusky mustard-like yellow, so she was faring better than the blue and green Yorpals. She looked to her left, and there was Himmel, a Poit, and he was currently cleaning his toenails with a spike device the humans swore by. Poits were a short race, deemed space elves by the humans, and got far more respect than the Yorpal. They were slender, athletic, and their eyes were fully colored, the only thing marking the passage of a pupil being a slightly lighter spot on the eye. They did, however, take a lot of shit due to their pointy ears, though it was far kinder than what was said about the Yorpal. On the other side of Freyrin was Zetrin, a Karlaken. They were a lizard-like people that had a hood much like a cobra, forked tongues, and a tail, though they walked around on legs and had hands much like the humans themselves, though with longer claw-like fingernails. The three of them were sitting with the other recruits, blinking blearily into the pre-dawn light of Missouri, and wondering what new hell was awaiting for them. The humans seemed to like doing this, their training bases arranged like a manic star system where the troopers marched or ran to their lessons or training. Sure, the starship training facilities and barracks had their own armories and DFAC, which is what the humans called a dining facility, but these were apparently reserved for slow days, where the weather was too nice. Freyrin was woken up with the rest of the recruits in their unisex barracks, only having fallen asleep 5 hours before, due to the constant passing of gas and bickering that became the usual backdrop to her nights in the barracks. A newer drill sergeant, a male human named Morrissey, was whacking on a trash can to wake them up, his blonde mustache still dusted with the powdered sugar of his usual morning donut. "Up and at 'em, my little bastard children! Time to train!" he bellowed, whacking on the metal trash can all the while. Freyrin had never seen a metal trash can out in the wild of the base or even on the space stations, and wondered if they were some kind of unique, stupid human drum. Freyrin had leaned up out of her rack, her brain fuzzy with sleep as she remembered it was Friday. Fridays were days for special lessons, usually painful or terrifying, before they were let off for their short passes into the base proper. Oddly, they were told not to pack a rucksack, only their assault bags with water and food, and the entire company had set off into the bleak darkness of the early morning, walking as per usual to their training site. According to the drill sergeants, they were not good enough for transport yet and had to still walk for a few more weeks. Himmel hated this most of all, even more than the other Poit. Their legs were quite short and walking around with the humans was a rather cardio-heavy affair. It didn't help that the Poit were masters of vehicle transportation and even hated walking to their kitchen from their living room. The Jinn had finally joined them, though they were behind in the training, coming in halfway after being ran through the basics. The Jinn had handled everything rather well, but they were a warlike race of the stars as it was, and apparently found human training fun. The Jinn all wore masks over their heads, usually bird or animal-shaped depending on the personality of the one wearing it, but only the human and Karlaken found them interesting. To the Yorpal and Poit, they were a bore, mucking about with their forearms and constantly pestering the humans for training. They were a lot like the humans physically, just blue and green-skinned with their odd freckles. No one knew what their heads looked like though, but they must have been somewhat triangular judging by the masks. Freyrin, despite her promotion, found it to be more of an anchor as she had to look after the other soldiers now, being graciously given the opportunity by Drill Sergeant Marshall. Thankfully, it was just Zetrin, Himmel, and a Jinn named Marwok. Marwok was an excitable male, and he ground against Freyrin like Velcro loops against a carpet. "So what happens now? Marwak asked, his eyes glowing gold from inside his mask as he looked around. Freren didn't even know how this four-armed lunatic was awake. We wait, Freren said heavily, still trying to blink the sleep from her eyes, her body crying out for her to slump down against the grass and take a nap. Likely weapons training or something. Himmel rubbed at his eyes. Having sucked down a rare energy paste, he managed to not eat during a chow break in the field 3 days before, and hoping it went into effect quickly. This isn't weapons training. I memorized the circuit map. This is armor training. Armor training? Zetran mused with a quiet hiss, scritching at his chin as he yawned. Are we using armored vehicles? Freren chuckled. I doubt it. Remember, we lucked out and drew out heavy shock infantry from the training roster. The most we'll see are heavily armored personnel carriers and the drop pods. Drop pods? Marwak said with easy excitement, looking around him where they sat on the grassy hill above the training site. Do you see any? Are we going to get dropped down today? I hear the human ones have a massive machine gun that pops out and provides cover. Himmel nodded. Those are the ones. Carries 1 platoon and lands them in full combat load. They were proven to be quite effective. I saw them when the humans came to liberate my homeworld from the Daramir, Marwak said, looking up at the sky. They came down like burning stars, spirits of vengeance raining down to bring justice to the wicked. Freren rolled her eyes. Poetic way of describing re-entry thrusters. They sat and quietly discussed human vehicles while the rest of the company tried to not fall asleep. Freren having to stand up with wobbly knees to discipline a flagging female Yorpal. To her annoyance, she was now Arun, or the head disciplinary female, thanks to her promotion and Yorpal culture. It was now her duty to discipline any female Yorpal that needed it, all while the males avoided their eyes. This one was easy, as Freren just cuffed the purple Yorpal across the back of her ears. Anye, Arun, the female Yorpal murmured, rubbing at her ears. Anye. Marwak looked to Himmel, tilting his head. She said she was sorry. Himmel said quietly, already having mastered both the Yorpal and Karlaken languages. Freren is their female boss now. Curious, Marwak said, tapping at the side of his mask. One by one, the personal vehicles of the training site staff pulled in until all 40 arrived, and Freren saw with open disdain that 10 of the cars were owned by range safety officers. Oh man, what are they doing here? Freren groaned, pulling up her knees and resting her forehead against them. They only show up if someone is shooting. On your feet, recruits! Drill Sergeant Killjoy bellowed, clapping his hands. Time for confidence training! Himmel looked to Zetran. I'm feeling confident. I am not going to enjoy this. I am confident this is another torture method disguised as training, Freren muttered, standing to her feet and brushing the grass from her tail. Zetran stood as well. I am confident this will be enlightening. I'm confident this is going to be fun, Marwak said, tapping his fist to his chest. Freren lowered her eyelids, glowering at both the Jinn and Karlaken. I'm confident I hate the two of you. Himmel chuckled, swinging his assault backstraps onto his shoulders. The company filed into the large concrete warehouse-looking building and realized quite quickly that while it was an armory, it just contained armor, no weapons of any kind. These were the combat suits worn by the heavy shock infantry of the human military, and even Freren could see why the humans were so effective in combat. The suits themselves looked straight up medieval. Not even in the funny sense, they just looked like suits of olive drab armor. As the drill sergeants were explaining the complex armor and electrical systems within the armor, Freren raised her hand. Drill Sergeant Marshall nodded to her, still holding one of the T-visored helmets. Where is the energy pack, Drill Sergeant? Freren asked, lowering her hand. Energy pack for what, Specialist? These are thermoelectrically powered, Drill Sergeant Marshall said, her short blonde hair catching the light oddly. Freren looked confused. For the energy shield, Drill Sergeant? Drill Sergeant Marshall's confused face slowly grew a grin. Energy shield? These don't have energy shields. Then what keeps the plasma bolts or energy beams from hitting the armor, Drill Sergeant? A point asked, raising her arm well after she spoke her question. Drill Sergeant Marshall gestured towards the suit of armor. They're supposed to shoot the armor, privates. Why else would we design the armor plates to deal with it? They hit us? A Yorpal cried out, his face a mixture of horror and fear. How are we supposed to shrug off a plasma bolt? The sound of a pen ricocheting off the Yorpal's head made a lot of people have to suck in their lips to not laugh, though the human recruits seemed to be having the most issues of all. How are we supposed to shrug off a plasma bolt, Drill Sergeant? The Yorpal corrected himself, rubbing at the spot between his eyes where Drill Sergeant Marshall had nailed him. Drill Sergeant Killjoy patted the well-worn suit. These are designed to stop nearly every munition round found on the battlefield market. While they break down over time, they are able to stop plasma, laser, caster, and bullet alike. The Tolkien weave bodysuit. What is a Tolkien, Drill Sergeant? A point asked, raising his hand before his question, unlike the other point. Is it a rare mineral? Drill Sergeant Marshall chuckled. More like, who is Tolkien? When this bodysuit material was under development, the project was called Myrtle, as a nod to his book. You know what? It's not important. The suit! Drill Sergeant Killjoy continued on, giving a knowing look to Drill Sergeant Marshall, as he knew about her fiction addiction. Can stop nearly all edged and pointed weapons, low-power pistol munitions, as well as being able to dampen the effects of blunt weapons. This chest plate has an inner pouch for medical supplies, emergency water gathered from sweat, a docking port for a data slate, as well as the emergency stimulant needles it will jab into you to stop bleeding and reduce pain. Drill Sergeant Marshall pointed to the helmet. The Mark III combat helmet is a digital asset suit that feeds real-time information to your helmet, such as rounds in your weapon, troop movements, an inner ear radio speaker, microphone, and everything needed to command the battlefield. The arm armor is attached to the shoulder guards, which are attached to the chest plate, meaning this is an easy slip-on suit of armor that auto-tightens into place. The leg armor is also one piece, slipped on much like climbing rigging or just a very awkward pair of lingerie. Drill Sergeant Marshall said, gesturing to the leg armor. These have the same kind of armor plating like the chest piece, keeping the thighs, knees, and shins safe. Remember to face yourself toward the enemy, because you only have no suit on the back of your legs. And try not to get shot in your groin. You may attach an armor plate there should you deem it fit, but it will interfere with sitting. And many veteran troops either ignore it or use a simple soft armor insert for their underwear. Many within the bleachers made a mental note that they were, in fact, going to be buying the insert. Frerin once again held up her hand, and Drill Sergeant Marshall pointed to her. So, we just take it? There's no generator to help stop rounds, no deflector generator, magnetic field eruptors? Frerin asked, as she had been carrying around the assumption that humans use the same kind of armor tech as everyone else. You just get shot? You just get shot, Drill Sergeant Marshall confirmed, nodding. During the combat movements of Irmar's second, the Darmar hit us with a massive EMP and TMP strike, attempting to knock out our electronics and powered weapons. While it crippled the Yorpals and Zetrans' defenses, we were unaffected, beside not being able to use our helmet electronics. While the Yorpal were too scared to move ahead with the lack of their shields, and the Zetran unable to use their combat suits, we humans were able to bisect the weaker Daramir lines. We took shots, used hand signals, and soaked up enemy fire while conducting our offensive. Drill Sergeant Killjoy nodded. It's because of our low-tech advantage that the Daramir could not get the breathing room to shift around their troops. While you all tucked your tail and hid with your fancy suits, we cleaned up house. The room was quiet, the human recruits curiously side-eyeing the aliens beside them as they stared in awestruck annoyance at the simple, stupid suit of armor. It does not produce a force field, Drill Sergeant Marshall began, smacking the chest plate of the armor suit. It does not suck your dick and it does not bake a cake, but it will keep you alive as long as the enemy doesn't get too creative. Drill Sergeant Killjoy chuckled. The weak points in the armor are the back of the legs, buttocks, and gaps in the armor along the joints so they can move.
Normally your training will alleviate these weak points, and it is today where you will learn how to do so.
A loud klaxon rang once, and what was presumed to be the back wall to the training room began to rise. Frerin stared with growing exhaustion that it was, in fact, a complete obstacle course, complete with berms, pillars, walls, and a range. Frerin breathed out under her breath, rubbing her fingers against her temples. Oh, the stars above! They're going to shoot us.
Explains why the suits have so many repaired holes,
Himmel murmured, pointing to the suits hanging in the racks that were, clearly, used for training. Frerin groaned openly, baring her fangs.
So they've always worn armor?
A pink-feathered opticon asked, looking up with awe at the videos of humans practicing in ancient suits of metal armor.
Why?
Miss Rimmicky giggled.
You know, I don't know why. I think humans have always correlated a suit of armor with warriors. Back in the days of melee weapons, humans had many types of armored suits, such as these knights, as they were called.
But as they got more advanced, they stopped wearing those goofy things, right? Tinto asked, the black Yorple chewing on her digipen. Miss Rimmiky's head fronds gave a twitch, and she turned to the large display.
Actually, no. Well into their pre-space age era, they still wore armored suits. The materials changed, but they always wore some kind of breastplate.
And then they got more advanced, right? They made field generators into suits of alveric weave, right? Tinto asked in alarm, looking over to the other Yorple, Ramira, whose ears were pinned down, thinking of her sister down on Earth. Exoskeletons, adaptive armor, trauma gel? Miss Rimmicky placed her hands on her wide hips, then clicked her tongue as she looked back up at the display screen.
Well, not exactly.
When the humans said low tech, they meant it. Frerin was heaving air in through her mouth and nose, the new helmets just barely giving her enough room to breathe with her snout. These had been made for the Yorple and Karlakens, the former having small juts for their ears, while the Jinn were wearing another specialized helmet that sunk down onto their face, replacing their face masks, but keeping their privacy. Inside the helmet was a miniature HVAC system that kept her head cool, and in thus, her visor unfogged, and she was thankful for it. While they were running about the obstacle course, Drill Sergeant Killjoy regaled them about how the first humans who used these helmets in the field had to break away the visor, as the Daramir's EMP and TMP attack had fried the electronics.
We charge a field bellowing like the knights of old. You had to be there to understand. We had never felt more alive.
Frerin heaved in a breath and hurtled over the last wall she had to clear, wishing that the humans had been kind enough to insert some sort of inner mechanism to help her bear the weight. Instead, her body had to bear the weight of the combat armor alone, and somehow, she just knew it wouldn't be the last time she wore one of these. As she ran, the combat armor stayed snug to her, auto-tightening and loosening with the quiet zzz of micro-adjusters within the armor. In the arm and shoulder armor were also micro-motors that helped reduce weight in the arms by a few scant pounds, working off of pure biomechanical elements. These were all powered by her body heat, and she was thankful that they were there at least. The Karlaken were having trouble, as when they first started out, their body heat was too low to fully power the suit, but that was changing as they started to really move. The Point, wearing far smaller suits of combat armor, were lagging behind with the Yorple as the Karlakens and Jinn excelled. This was part team exercise for the Point, as they had to help each other over the taller walls and learn the limitations of their arm armor micromotors. Somehow, the humans had figured out that they could use extremely minimal shielding on these motors, and were nigh impossible to knock out except for pure blunt force trauma. Frerin groaned as she panted up a slight concrete slope, and it was here she had to duck and roll under gaps in walls, allowing her to feel how the armor puffed air into the inner padding to lessen blunt force trauma. As Frerin and a male Yorple with dusky red fur both rolled at the same time, they both came up onto their feet, staggering in their step.
Could use some more cushion,
the Yorple growled, holding a hand to his right buttock as his helmet produced a slightly modulated version of his voice via the small speaker. Frerin nodded her helmeted head, turning to look at him.
I felt most of that.
A pink Yorple rolled, came to her feet, then toppled over onto her chest, skidding down the other side of the concrete hill with a yelp and a screech of hardened armor plate.
She felt all of that.
The male Yorple muttered, eliciting a laugh from Frerin. The next obstacle was crawling. So they did, the Yorples sticking together out of habit. They all, however, followed behind Frerin, also out of habit. The armor made it difficult due to the weight, but they came out the other side of the obstacle, their armor covered with sand and their bodies rocking back and forth as they all tried to catch their breath.
These are so stupid!
Another yellow female Yorple raged from inside her helmet, her speaker auto-balancing her raging voice.
Who the Corwick just wears a suit of armor plate?
A green male Yorple nodded, leaning forward to rest his hands on his knees.
They don't even have an exoskeleton inside these things. It's just micromotors that do just enough to make you wish they did more. Our combat suits even have microsuits inside of them. How are humans just using these as is?
Another Yorple asked, his voice weary. As if on cue, a long stream of human recruits came running by out of the obstacle the Yorple just finished, playfully clapping the Yorple on their helmets or the shoulder as they ran past. Frerin watched these ease of movement and felt a deep inner shame as even the human females seemed to move at ease while wearing the armor.
I hate them sometimes.
The pink Yorple growled, her tail swishing back and forth angrily.
I really, really hate them.
The rest of the obstacles came and went, with the Point coming in dead last, though even the Point knew this was going to happen. The training came to a halt at the far end of the warehouse, but Frerin did not like how this section looked. There were 10 humans lined up in front of what was clearly a shooting range, and all of them had different kinds of pistols, rifles, and the one at the end had some kind of large caliber sniper rifle. The range itself was just another obstacle course, but it had walls, doors, windows, a long hallway, and what appeared to be some analog of a trench. What was really distressing was that the range ran towards the humans with the weapons. "All of you will be shot," said Drill Sergeant Marshall aloud to all the recruits, human and other. "All of you will bear the honor mark of all recruits who pass through training. At the end of the range, you will be shot in the right thigh to demonstrate the functions of your armor and build your confidence in that it will not let you bleed out. You will be shot from a high-caliber sniper rifle first, and at range. This will hit you in the chest and likely make you see stars. The second shot will be from a rifle to the top of your helmet, the third to your leg armor, and so on. At the end of the course, Sergeant First Class Mary will then use her accuracy with pistols and clip you between the leg armor gaps on the move, shooting you in the thigh. Do not be ashamed if you fall. It hurts like a bitch." At least here, at the end of the training regime, the humans looked as nervous as the Star citizens. "First up will be Specialist Frerin," Drill Sergeant Marshall said proudly, then motioned for the yellow-furred Yorple to advance to the yellow line on the floor. "Me?" Frerin wailed, gesturing to the human recruits beside her. "You usually make the humans go first." Drill Sergeant Marshall stamped her boot on the yellow line. "Get the fuck up here, Specialist!" Frerin stomped her own combat-shoed paws, swung her arms around angrily as she said a string of colorful curses in her native tongue, then stalked up to the yellow line. On the ground were her instructions, and the first one simply said, "Go through the door at a run." The door had no knob or lock and was clearly loose on the hinge. Frerin gave another frustrated, curse-laden yell, then took off at a run, the micromotors in her armor humming and trilling as she pumped her arms. She ran through the door, shoulder-checking it open with her armored shoulder, then felt the .338 Lapua Magnum smash into her chest like a freight train. The breath left her lungs despite the body armor compensating what it could for the impact, and her breasts felt like someone had smashed them with a hammer. She stumbled forward, gasping with her arms held out for balance. But she was alive. Frerin looked down at her chest plate, and despite the ragged hunk of armor plate missing, it had stopped the round.
"Continue!"
Drill Sergeant Marshall called out over the intercom system, and Frerin regained her breath on the run, stumbling towards the next obstacle. She followed the instructions on the floor and hurdled a low wall, though her head rocking backwards ripped her shoed paws off the floor. She landed with a hard exhale as the thinner backplate helped absorb the impact. She was panting and breathing raggedly now in panic, her vision swimming as she looked around the inside of her helmet. But there was no hole, no blood. Just a little dent on the helmet where the armor had deflected the bullet. Her helmet display chirped in her ear, and it was showing her where she had been hit. It showed the center point shot on her chest, which her more tender areas were still smarting from, and the glancing blow off of her helmet. Above these readouts were the words non-compromised, 97% survivability. Well, that's neat. Farron panted, then leaned up, rolling onto her feet with a swish of her tail. 2 down, 8 to go. And those 8 came with a vengeance, to the point she wondered if it was somehow personal. The veterans down range were crack shots, the rifle round catching her in the thigh armor, ripping her leg out from under her and making her stumble, and she heard the sniper rifle fire, apparently shooting at someone behind her. When the 7th shot rang out and caught her in the shoulder pad, Farron could see now that all the range safety officers were hardened veterans. All of them bore the scars of their service, and one male human even had a fully mechanical leg adorned with etched carvings to resemble tattoos. As 2 more shots rang off her chest plate and arm armor, Farron, following the prompts on the floor, to hold her arms a certain way to close the armor gaps, she made eye contact with the last shooter, Sergeant First Class Mary. She was extremely cute for a human. Even Farron had to admit that. At just 5'2" and maybe just over 100 pounds, she was a stunning specimen that had chemically dyed her hair a bright, cheery sky blue. She was even smiling brightly at Farron, and she smiled back from under her helmet, though the smile died from Farron's lips when Sergeant First Class Mary brought the highly advanced pistol up to her eye, and she waved her free hand at Farron. Say cheese, the human giggled out, then promptly split a heavy caliber pistol round through Farron's leg with expert aim. Farron had been on the run, and she let out a howling screech of pain as she came down onto her knee, skidding along the ground before rolling and tumbling along the concrete. Her helmet let out a quick of an alert, read out an injury display that showed her thigh had taken a bullet. Then her breastplate whizzed. A sharp puncture stabbed through her upper chest, eliciting another scream from Farron. But oddly enough, the pain started to fade away quite quickly. She rolled over into a sitting position, looked down, and her leg wasn't bleeding. Oh, wow, Farron said in her drug-induced haze, tilting her head at her leg. Look at that. Stopped the bleeding nearly instantly. Blood-transported medical nanobots? You're a sharp one, a male human medic said as he grabbed Farron by her drag handle and pulled her out of the way. Yeah, the suit injects nanotech that heals the wound. You'll see it stitching your leg together. Farron looked down, blinking at the small hole in her leg forming into a neat white scar. It was actually growing hair back, though it was white. Huh? Wait, my suit thingy didn't work. You guys said it stopped pistol rounds. Yeah, don't worry about that. That round is designed to kill anything at close range. The medic said with a chuckle as another medic ran past him, grabbing an angrily hissing Carlagan that just got shot in his thigh as well. It's a pistol round designed to punch through light armor, lets you recruits know the limitations of the undersuit, but also leaves an extremely clean wound channel. Farron shrugged her shoulders, her drug-induced haze hitting its peak as the body quickly metabolized the combat stimulant. Huh. All right then. That Mary person sure is cute. Did you see her hair? It's blue. Do humans always dye their hair like that? I read about you. You guys don't have blue hair. The medic chuckled and shook his head as he deposited Farron into the recovery area. 3 other minor medical personnel jogging over to check the Yorple over and observe the readings from her suit. They really need to tone down the dosage on new recruits. Do they have to give them the full charge? Farron was happily eating a pack of cream cookies, her helmet tucked between her legs. Then Himmel was plopped next to her, and she waved her hand in his face with a painless, wide-eyed smile. Himmel! They give you cookies! Great, Himmel muttered, and he looked down at the ragged hole in his leg. They shot me.
I thought the suit stopped pistol rounds. Freren giggled through a cheek full of cream cookies.
They're shooting everyone with a special bullet. Look at how pissed Zetrin is.
Himmel looked over to the angry, pouting Carlaken who was sitting next to the other pouting Carlakens, as apparently the pain drug within the suit was not working on their biology, and the medics were currently applying other drugs to see what worked. Himmel, fully doped up on combat stimulant, raised a hand and waved cheerfully to Zetrin as a male human recruit was dragged next to him. The human's eyes narrowed in annoyance due to also being shot.
Zetrin, hi!
Zetrin looked over to the point, saw he was fully drugged, then promptly raised his middle finger as he had to face the full pain of being shot in the thigh.
Fuck you, Himmel.
Freren and Himmel both chortled, chewing through mouthfuls of cream cookies. One by one, recruits were deposited into the staging area, dragged there by medics as they were usually not trusted to walk with their first stimulant package being delivered to their systems. As the entire company feasted on cream cookies and switchel, their drill sergeants explained how over time they would need higher and stronger dosages of combat stem should they get shot too many times. First Sergeant Mary walked out with her pistol holstered, then congratulated everyone for not chickening out and taking their bullet like soldiers. Now when you look down at your leg and the legs of others like you will know that you all experience the same kind of pain, something that will forever set you apart from civilians. Sergeant First Class Mary said, then pointed to a point when she raised her hand. Do the soldiers of European region also do this? She asked, finishing her third pack of cream cookies. Sergeant First Class Mary blew a raspberry and waved her hand. Of course not. They say it's way too dangerous. All of the alien recruits narrowed their eyes at her, and she giggled to herself while grabbing her own pack of cookies. When the first transport truck arrived to ferry them home, all of the point were besides themselves, cheering and clapping their hands in delight. For the first time in months, they wouldn't be walking home, and it was the point who clambered onto the buses first. They were then marched off as they were still wearing the training armor, and they quickly deposited the armor into the appropriate bins. When all the armor was put away for repair, everyone got onto their own respective transport vehicles, called cattle cars by the humans, and Freren happily wagged her tail when the thing lurched into motion. She looked beside her to another female Yorpal and grinned, both of them knowing they had finally made it past the first half of the training.